Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first here, fire danger graphic. Got some areas of extreme fire danger, kind of a windy, breezy day in areas here over the interior, and that helped elevate things. And so we've got some areas of extreme here over the upper Yukon Valley. Temperatures, some areas rising into the lower 80s this afternoon. And that extreme area extending off to the southwest here into the central interior, and some areas of high fire danger here, Seward Peninsula, locally into the Lotto Hills, and then up just north of there in that area, a little bit there over the Yukon Delta, northeast Bristol Bay, on up into the in and around the west side of Lake Iliamna, and a little bit here over the Copper River Basin. And actually some rain moving in to the northern Koyukuk Valley, actually Fort Yukon, after seeing temperatures in the mid-70s earlier today. They're reporting rain now, temperatures into the upper 60s. And so that should improve, especially over here in the northwest. Same pattern going on there with cooler moisture conditions coming down with that system to the north. So that's going to suppress things a little bit here, at least tonight and into tomorrow. And on satellite imagery here, you can see that system coming down, bringing the moisture with it. But in advance of that, temperatures rising with partly mostly sunny skies in the lower 80s. Beaver, Chuck-Yitzhak, about 81 degrees this afternoon, with mid-70s, mid to upper 70s occurring here from the eastern interior all the way back into the Seward Peninsula, right on out to the Bering Sea coast, nearly with Breivik Mission reporting 74 degrees this afternoon. Otherwise, again, with that, mostly sunny skies, especially back here to the west, clear skies out across the Bering Sea into the Russian Far East, St. Lawrence Island, sunny today up again through the Bering Strait. And then this all convective type clouds here developing with some scattered thunderstorms developing over the upper Tanana Valley there. And then kind of trailing back along that line of clouds right there, a couple of strikes showing up this afternoon with that feature. Otherwise, mostly cloudy here, south central Alaska, a little bit of shower activity or light rain going on areas of the North Gulf Coast, east side of the Kenai Peninsula, and a little more extensive area of light rain, but only a tenth of an inch falling at Kodiak during the day today with that main frontal boundary there. And the southeast coast, generally mostly cloudy or partly mostly cloudy with a few sun breaks in some areas. And the Bering Sea out to the west, pretty well cloudy here over the southern Bering with areas of drizzle and fog. Actually, the entire way from the eastern Aleutians all the way out to Shimia. A little bit more of windy conditions here. In some cases, gusts 30, 35 miles an hour. And seeing that same pattern as well, turning an arm, seeing gusts 45 miles an hour out of the east today with Anchorage International Airport having a gust of 36 miles per hour. And actually even some 25 to 35 mile an hour winds occurring ahead and along this system as it drops southward in toward the central interior. And on the chart today, here's the areas of scattered thunderstorms developing in the area ahead of this main cloud and moisture field there, coming back mostly rain or showers or areas of steady rain, totaling anywhere from say a quarter of an inch at Umiat Airfield today, with Anaktuvuk Pass speaking about 3/10 of an inch of rain. And actually some areas back in the upslope areas of the western mountains and the northwest mountains are picking up as much as half an inch of precipitation with that. Otherwise, much lighter amounts here with the thunderstorm activity developing this afternoon, and pretty light amounts also here with the showers and rain along the North Gulf Coast. Again, a little bit more there. Kodiak, about 1/10 of an inch, and rain with this front extending all the way in toward the eastern Aleutians, form of rain, fog, or drizzle. And that same pattern, cloudy with drizzle and areas of fog over the remainder of the Aleutians. Off the coast of the Panhandle, a little bit of low clouds and fog here right under this ridge building up there, and kind of a mostly cloudy day over the inland areas as well. And for tonight, there could be a few showers around up over the northern southeast coast. It should stay dry, but mostly cloudy on down to the south. And rain will tend to increase here along the North Gulf Coast, especially the western North Gulf Coast. That front lifts northward, some of which could push in to the Hoeppner area, and of course back toward Iliamna Lake, and maybe as far north as across the inlet from Kenai. And that'll extend back in toward Bristol Bay, Cape Newenham, those areas on out into the Bering, with the main lows parked here south of the Alaska Peninsula. And then some evening thunderstorms along this trough axis here as that upper system kind of starts to slide mostly off to the east. We're going to leave that boundary right in through here with somewhat cooler conditions back to the north and drier, with it, you see, clearing out, which is already occurring on the north slope there. That'll continue tonight and should clear out fairly nice over the northwest part of the state. Otherwise, for tomorrow, we're going to see some periods of rain and fog move into the southeast coast, especially the southern panhandle there, with a few isolated showers on up to the north, and from Cape Yakatagan toward Prince William Sound, look for periods of light rain, possibly with fog. Mostly in western Prince William Sound. A few showers will develop over the Copper River Basin, and this precipitation will stay mostly over southern Cook Inlet to the western Alaska Range. Kodiak, best chance of light rain earlier in the day, may end in the afternoon as that band tries to pull up to the north far enough. But the next one here coming up spreads more rain into the Alaska Peninsula. And really not much change out over the Bering Sea. North wind's kind of on the gusty side. Could see gusts 35 miles an hour here through the central Aleutian areas, but much lighter back up toward the Bering Strait. Should be a partly to mostly sunny day once again, hopefully there, with VFR flying over the northern Bering, even the Yukon Delta looking good. Northern interior right on out to the Arctic coast. Pretty nice, dry with partly mostly sunny skies. And again, thunderstorms developing anywhere along this trough axis here in the central interior areas. And then the outlook for Sunday, same pattern here. We got this trough in the interior, thermal trough, and some that leftover boundary might interact with some of this moisture lifting northeastward. So you could see maybe an increase in the precipitation along with the thunderstorm activity here over the 40-mile country and upper Tanana Valley region. Otherwise, look for showers, mostly cloudy or partly cloudy skies here south central Alaska, partly to mostly sunny on Sunday there, with a few lingering showers North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and this frontal boundary edges some more precipitation back up toward Kodiak and then back down along the Alaska Peninsula with northerly winds, drier conditions with lots of clouds out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Could be some clearing out there to the west. And this, the original front kind of dies out along the Panhandle, makes for a mostly rainy day across much of the southeast coast tomorrow. And again, the whole upper level low slowly tracking northeastward here. So this next front will bring even another heavier, more widespread dose of rain in probably sometime late Sunday or into Monday. And for lows tonight, they're across the Panhandle, mostly in the upper 40s to mid 50s, and 40s to lower 50s here in the interior. A little below the 30-degree mark, 29 there, or upper 20s, central eastern Arctic coast, and for the highs tomorrow, a little bit milder than your early morning lows, 30s to lower 40s. But again, cooling here in the interior, not quite as warm as what you saw today, but some areas could still reach the lower 70s and 65 to 70-ish here southern Alaska, and some cases of the Panhandle reaching the lower 60s. Lows the following morning, looks like lower 50s for the southeast coast, lower to mid 40s in the Aleutians, near 40 for the Pribilof, St. Lawrence Island, and lower 30s, a little milder there on the Arctic coast with 45 to 53 here in the central interior, followed by highs recovering a little bit here, going back into the lower 70s for the upper Yukon Valley, with 70s again extending back to the west into the Kuskokwim Yukon River Valley, or deltas there, 65 to 70 south central Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, IFR here into the southern Bering Sea, up across the Aleutians, marginal there for Unmak and Unalaska Islands, and then also marginal for the Alaska Peninsula. You can see VFR here, central northern Bering Sea, right up into the Chukchi, and then the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, marginal with IFR off the coast. Otherwise, marginal VFR up and along the Alaska Range here, possibly even the Copper River Basin, but not actually reaching the eastern range here. And VFR in the interior, IFR, Kodiak Island, up into the Gulf to Cordova or so, and marginal VFR across the Panhandle. And for Saturday afternoon, IFR moves on in across Prince of Wales Island up to Port Alexander, maybe as far north as Sitka. Otherwise, the remainder of the southeast coast marginal, and marginal VFR into the southern southeast Copper River Basin, mostly hung up along the coast range there. IFR, western Prince William Sound down the east side of the Kenai Peninsula, and marginal VFR Cook Inlet over to the Alaska Range and over the southwest mountains here. And less marginal VFR on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, otherwise VFR in the interior, and improvement here over the southern Bering and the Aleutians. And then for Sunday morning, we've got band IFR here between Atka and over to Nikolsky, northward across the Pribilofs. Otherwise, looking really good out there in the Bering. VFR, same thing here for Bristol Bay. Marginal for the Alaska Peninsula with, looks like, possible IFR Chignik there over to Sitkinak on up to possibly the state airport there at Kodiak. Otherwise, marginal again for Cook Inlet. Northern Cook Inlet kind of VFR, and then from there north, good VFR, and IFR, southeast coast. And then for the afternoon, IFR now along the south coast of the Panhandle, marginal to the marginal inland, except some leftover IFR up toward the north there over to Yakutat. Marginal VFR now in across the southeast interior, right up to the Alaska Range, south central Alaska included. And Kodiak, the Alaska Peninsula marginal, VFR in the interior, marginal VFR along the central western Arctic coast, and then some IFR here over the south central Bering Sea, a break, and then just some IFR again pushing in toward the Shimiatu area. Passes for tomorrow, Anaktuvik and Adigan, both VFR flying, both passes there. Lake Clark and Merrill, mostly marginal VFR at times, possibly could be VFR at least for some shorter times. And same forecast for rainy, marginal VFR at times. Windy, though, should be VFR the entire day. Isabel, same forecast. Open for Mentasta as well. And Tanita, VFR. Portage, though, marginal VFR with IFR conditions, eastern entrance. And for Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Looking at the freezing levels, we've got 8,000 to 10,000 feet here across the Panhandle. Cold upper low there by Banks Island, pushing some chillier air down 2,000 feet. In fact, the surface there right up to the Brooks Range. And otherwise warmer back to the west here, 8,000 feet over the northern Bering and about 6,000 feet over the Aleutians. Icing, nothing out here in the west or to the north. Could be some mixed icing here due to the convection over the eastern interior areas, upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, and then areas of isolated moderate rime icing here, North Gulf Coast, Kodiak, and then locally up along the Alaska Range. Heavier stuff, though, coming up. Could see considerable moderate moving in towards specifically Prince of Wales Island above about 9,000 feet. Jet stream, big trough out here over the next 4 or 5 days, several days. Through the weekend, it'll be tracking slowly northeastward, crossing the Panhandle probably early next week. And so that's going to keep that area in a wet weather pattern. 9,000 feet here, southeast 15 to 25 here off the southeast coast, 5 to 10 knots over the interior, westerlies 15, eastern Arctic coast, and then stronger northeast, 25 to as high as 40 knots there out in the west, and at 3,000 feet, a little lighter there, but the same pattern, 20 to 25 knots. Southeast 20 to 25, Kodiak Island, across Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, 5 to 15 over the interior, on up to the Arctic coast, and 10 to maybe 20 there for the Panhandle. Turbulence-wise, not enough wind there to create anything significant as far as turbulence goes there or over the interior areas, but areas of light to isolated moderate chop here along and on the lee side of the Alaska Peninsula up in toward Kemishak Bay, as well as the central Aleutians due to really the northerly winds there. Probably should have thrown Shimmy and Attu in that area as well. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the sea ice conditions and the marine forecasts.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the earth and grows our food. While the sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the sun doesn't stay at the sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. This is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
The GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy. And then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car, except for when I push the button it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I as a human being can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system is going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis. Not a lot of change out here over the Chukchi Sea from yesterday or even back here on the east side. And the forecast is northerly winds, mostly northerly winds, are going to continue here along this section of the ice edge. So over the next 5 days, that's expected to drift southward. While not much change is expected here in the Chukchi Sea, except for maybe that zone there might oscillate around a little bit depending on which way the wind's blowing. And moving on to coastal water forecasts here along the Panhandle, southeast winds 20 knots on the south coast, seas 7 feet. Small craft advisories on the north coast, 25-knot winds with 7-foot seas. Lynn Canal 15 knots from the south, seas 3 feet. Lighter southerlies there for Stevens Passage, and then up to 20 knots from the south for Clarence Strait. Outlook for Sunday, bring it down to 15 knots from a southerly direction, Clarence Strait. No change for Stevens Passage. And Lynn Canal, south 15 knots, south 20 here on the south coast, seas 7 feet with small craft advisories for the remainder of the coastline, all southeast 25 knots, seas 7 feet. And for Prince William Sound, east winds tomorrow 20 knots, seas at about 3 feet. Small craft advisories due to easterly winds at 25 knots here for the North Gulf Coast, seas running 8 feet. That same forecast good for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay as well. Cook Inlet northeast up to 20 with seas running 5 feet. Outlook for Sunday, no change here north of the Forelands. Northeasterlies at 20 knots, seas 5 feet. Southern Cook Inlet north 15 and northeast 15 for Kamishak Bay. East winds at 20 knots for the Barren Islands. And the North Gulf Coast kind of split the difference here. The west side east 15, then small craft advisories on the east side there with 25-knot winds, and Prince William Sound easterlies at 15 knots. Kodiak Island, eastern shore, or the eastern marine zones here, east winds 15 knots, otherwise Shelikof Strait northeast at 20. Sitkinak to Castle Cape, east winds 20 knots with small craft advisory easterlies there from Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev. North side of the peninsula, northeast at 20, and a little bit lighter there for Bristol Bay with easterlies at 15. And the outlook for Sunday, northeast 15 Bristol Bay, seas only 2 feet, and then northerlies 20 to 25 knots here across the Alaska Peninsula with seas running 4 to as high as 9 feet there. And northeast winds, kind of an increase here, definitely from Castle Cape to Sitkinak, 30-knot northeast winds, seas 11 feet, and small craft advisories here at Kodiak Island, including Shelikof Strait, east northeasterlies 25 to 30 knots, those seas here building up to 10 feet. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, north to northeast winds, 25 knots, seas 7 to 9 feet there. AKwx, a little lighter northerly winds at 20 knots with 20-knot winds extending all the way out to Shimei and Attu. And then for Sunday, we'll increase the winds out here in the west a little bit, northwest 25 there from Shimei or Attu over toward Amchitka, and then north 25, and then those northerlies diminish to about 20 knots. So no change from the winds for AKwx on Sunday from what you'll see tomorrow, and northerlies 15 knots for the Fox Islands. And for the southwest coast, looks like an east wind at about 15 here south of Nunivak Island along the Yukon Delta. On up to St. Lawrence Island, north winds at 20 knots, northeast 20 Norton Sound, north 20 for the St. Matthew Island zone, and the Pribilofs north of 15. Outlook for Sunday, south 10 for the Pribilofs, northeast 10 to 15 here for the southwest coast, north 15 St. Matthew Island, and about 20 knots there for St. Lawrence Island. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, you got westerlies in the forecast tomorrow, only 10 to 15 knots, light southwest breeze there on the central coast, and then east 15, northeast 15 here, Cape Thompson all the way down, or Cape Beaufort all the way down to Wales. And then for the Sunday outlook, northerlies at about 20 knots here from Wales up to Cape Thompson, otherwise north 15 for the west and central coast, and then swinging around to the southwest and then the south at 15 knots there for the Eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for tonight, again, some lingering thunderstorms into this evening, especially early evening. It'll be a little farther back, but then in a diminishing mode, but won't end altogether here, especially the scattered showers over the mostly the eastern interior. Rain increases somewhat here, continues Kodiak Island, but increase and push up toward the North Gulf Coast, and a few scattered showers in the northern Panhandle. For tomorrow, rain increases, especially over the central and southern southeast coast there, and also kind of a rainy day in store for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, southern Cook Inlet to Kodiak Island, and again some scattered thunderstorms along that trough axis in the interior. About the same pattern on Sunday here. This may shift northward a little bit, but stays wet over the Panhandle, and more rain into Kodiak Island. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.